These words are from Pat Uribe Lichty, different yet united as we light our chalice to begin our service. We come from many places, along different paths, bringing different truths. We come with different histories and different realities, and yet we come together as one people, with faith that we can use our differences to heal ourselves and each other, to bring wholeness to a fractured world. We come seeking to find community, to find acceptance of who we are. In this place, we may find others who are much like us and others who are much different. May our lit chalice remind us that we are a people taught by different stories with many voices, but always one people working for a world where love creates justice and justice gives birth to peace. Our opening words today we practice being called by Samantha Lynn Wilson. A call to worship is secretly a call to focus our attention. Choosing to focus our attention is countercultural. Daily, we are called to worship at the altar of many devices, surveillance systems, we let take lead over our every waking moment. We are called by headlines set purely on our activation and by tools that gamify our every human connection. We are not called, we are led. We are not led, we are entrapped. Instead, here, we practice being called. We are called to bring our attention to the altar of unpredictable human relatedness. We are called by these ancestors, this wood, this room's particular light, this chalice's particular fire, and these children. We are called to focus all our attention on a foolhardy and open-hearted commitment to share a future together we cannot cancel nor control. In the words of the poet-farmer Wendell Berry, we are called here to do something today that does not compute. Spirit of life, call our collective attention to this precise moment, the threshold between then and now, the moment upon which we hang our honest promises like portraits, chiseled and framed by our own hands, imperfectly and together. Come, let us worship together.
Good morning.
Good morning.
And welcome everyone to the Unitarian Universalist Church of Oak Cliff. My name is Ian Gray, and I am the worship ministry co-chair and have been put up here again. So for those of you who haven't heard me before, they put me up here occasionally and people still seem to want to hear what I want to say, so let's do it again. So today, before I get into it, I want to tell you a little bit about how this sermon came to be, which is, it was Super Bowl Sunday, and I liked the pun Super Bowl. That's really where it started. But out of that, the real question was, how do we support our community? How do we take the limited resources that we have, and how do we support each other? We have a little food pantry, we have a little community garden, we have a lot of little things, but what does that look like when there's so much going on outside that we can't help with? So that's where it started with I wanted to read the parable of the stone soup. This version was written by Brandy Chase. One day, a kindly traveler came upon a cold and lonely village. He carried only a knapsack filled with a little kindling and an empty iron pot. The village seemed an unfriendly place. The streets were empty, and every window and door was locked. The traveler was tired. He was hungry too. He walked to a house and knocked on the door. He thought he heard someone move inside. He thought he saw a curtain move, but no one answered the door. The traveler did not give up. He walked to another house and knocked. This time, a woman and 3 small children came to the door. "Hello," said the traveler. "I am looking for a place to rest my head and a bite to eat. Can you help me?" "No," said the woman. "We have not any food for days. My own children are hungry. You should go to the next village." The traveler smiled and said, My, you are in worse shape than I am. Not to worry, I will happily share my stone soup with you. All I need is water for my pot and a fire." The children gathered water and wood, and the traveler used his kindling to start a small fire. Soon they had a cheery fire, and the water in the pot began to boil. The traveler pulled 3 small stones from his pocket and dropped them in, plop, 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 into the pot. The woman could not believe her eyes. "A soup from stones?" she asked. "Yes," said the traveler, "it's quite delicious, although it would be tastier with a bit of salt and herbs." "Oh," said the woman, "I have salt and herbs in my kitchen." As the woman added the herbs and the salt to the pot, the door of her neighbor's house opened. A man and his young son came out. He asked, "What are you doing?" And the son looked at the pot. "We're making stone soup," answered the traveler. "A soup from stones?" asked the father. "Yes," said the traveler. "It's quite delicious, although it would be a bit tastier if we had a few vegetables." "Daddy," said the son, "I think we have some carrots and potatoes under the stairs." The man and his son added the carrots and potatoes to the pot, and the smell of the stone soup lifted into the air. A window opened, and an elderly woman called down to her neighbors, "What are you doing down there?" "We're making stone soup," they replied. "A soup from stones?" asked the elderly woman. "Yes," said the traveler. "It's quite delicious, although it would be a bit tastier if we had a little meat." "You don't say," said the elderly woman. "Well, I happen to have some." One by one, the villagers opened their doors. Each brought a little something to add to the stone soup. When the pot was full, the villagers offered bread and butter and other goodies. One villager even shared his homemade apple cider. The traveler exclaimed, "This will be a meal fit for a king." The villagers and the traveler sat together and enjoyed a delicious meal made from stones. Their tummies full of food, their hearts full of joy, they declared to one another, "Who would have imagined such a meal? The stones must be magic." The traveler answered, "No, no, there is no magic in these stones. Each of us shared just a little, and together we have made a feast." When the meal was over and all the dishes done, the traveler filled his knapsack, collected kindling, and put his pot and stones away. At dawn, the traveler continued on his way. The villagers waved and shouted their thanks until he was out of sight. "What shall we eat today?" they asked one another. A child held up a stone and said, "I have an idea. Let's make stone soup." So, when we hear this story, it's easy to focus on the ending, the full pot, the shared meal, the sense of joy and community. But I want to linger for a moment at the beginning. A cold village, empty streets, people who are hungry and afraid. No one is described as cruel or greedy. They are cautious. They are tired. They're just trying to survive. When the traveler asked for food, the woman says she has none. She's telling the truth as she understands it. She does not have a meal to give. She has scraps. She has pieces. She does not even have enough to feed her own children. Stone Soup is not a story about selfishness or selflessness. It's a story about people who believe that unless they can offer everything, they have nothing to offer at all. How often have we fallen into that trap when faced with overwhelming problems? It's a belief that shows up everywhere, especially in hard times. It shows up when we say, "I can't fix this." It shows up when we say, "Someone else is better equipped to handle this." It shows up when we say, "What difference would it make?" "I'm sorry, you should go to the next village, the next church, the next neighbor over. They might be able to offer help." And that is exactly the belief that allows fear to spread. Because when people feel powerless, isolation feels safer. It's dangerous out there. Stay inside. Locked doors feel wiser than shared tables. Waiting feels prudent because look what might happen if you step forward. Fascism feeds on fear. Fascism does not begin with open violence. It begins by convincing people that they are alone, that their neighbors cannot be trusted, that cooperation is weakness, that survival requires self-reliance, compliance, obedience, and silence. It whispers, "You don't have enough for yourself. How can you possibly help someone else?" It says, "Stay inside, lock your door, protect what's yours." It demands that this problem is too big and you are too small to do anything about it. What can you do? What can we do? We're left waiting for a hero, for someone to lead us, or for our neighbors to wake up, hoping, wishing that someone better, someone stronger, anyone will step up and save us. And look who steps in. But in the story, the traveler doesn't swoop in and save them. He just shows up with a pot and a couple of stones. The villagers don't have a moral epiphany of the axiological benefits of resource sharing. The characters don't fundamentally change, but their imagination does. But their imagination does. The magic isn't in the stones. The magic is the moment they stop seeing their pantry as a fortress and start seeing it as a resource. One person imagines that their handful of salt belongs in the shared pot, and the spell of isolation is broken. Then someone else suggests that what they have might belong in the pot: salt, herbs, vegetables, a little meat. Each contribution small enough to feel insignificant, but each one makes the next step easier. Each act of sharing lowers the cost of the next. Each opened door makes the next one feel less frightening. This is fundamentally just mutual aid. That's actually what the sermon's about. Mutual aid is not charity. Charity moves in one direction, from those who have to those who are in need. Mutual aid moves in circles. It recognizes that none of us get here through hard times alone, and none of us should have to. It rejects the question, who deserves help, and asks instead, who is here, and what do we need together? This is obviously not a new idea for us. When you think about it, our own faith tradition is a stone soup story. Unitarianism and Universalism were once two completely separate movements. Each carried something precious, but each also had its limits. The Unitarians emphasized reason, conscience, ethical responsibility. They insisted that faith must engage the mind and challenge unjust authority. The Universalists proclaimed radical love. They insisted that no one was beyond redemption, that no one was disposable, that grace was sacred, not scarce. For generations, these traditions lived alongside each other, doing their own work, fighting their own fights, and then, in a moment shaped by World War, McCarthyism, the looming shadow of nuclear annihilation, and of course, the moral crisis, the tipping point of segregation. They recognized something essential about their problem. Neither was doing enough alone. Reason without love could become cold and detached. Love without reason could become fickle or remain naive. So they came together in 1961. Not because they agreed on everything, and not because they wanted to erase their differences, but because they trusted that their shared survival, their moral survival, their spiritual survival required partnership. Unitarian Universalism was not born from abundance. It was born from courage, humility, and necessity. We brought the buildings. We brought the people. We brought them together. And together, we made stone soup. And that history matters right now. Because the pressures we are living under, and I don't want to sound like a broken record up here, but let's be honest, they are not new. We are seeing the mask slip off a tyrannical system built on the denial of rights and the erasure of identity of whole populations. For our siblings of color, this isn't a looming threat or a political shift. It's the same air they've been forced to breathe for generations. It's Jim Crow by another name. It's the violence of the Civil War that never really ended. And its following century of state-sponsored terror. It is the hard fact that we must remember that when the Nazis looked for a blueprint for ethnic cleansing, they looked for it here. They studied how this country exterminated Native Americans and subjugated Black people and learned how to systematize that hate for themselves. And now, the same blueprint gets used again and again. Whether it is a government that executes people in the street with no accountability, or laws selectively enforced and designed to strip away the rights of people to even exist in society. The goal is all the same: to fracture us, to break us, to convince us that our institutions are hollow and that our neighbors are enemies. I say this not to overwhelm us, but to remind us of why community has always been the answer to surviving oppression. Community has always been the answer to surviving oppression. They want us to believe that the pot is empty and that the doors must stay locked. But this pattern, the stone soup pattern, also repeats throughout history. Whenever people refuse to believe the lie that we are alone. The civil rights movement was not one organization. It was hundreds of different groups, churches, students, labor unions. It was the NAACP providing legal strategy. It was the Southern Christian Leadership Conference organizing clergy. It was the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Council Committee. Yes, SNCC for short. Bringing the young people to the front lines. It was the freedom riders knowing that they were going to die. And it was the local congregations just like ours, small, scared, and thinking they had nothing to offer. But they did. They offered their buildings as meeting spaces, their basement as freedom schools, their kitchens as places to feed organizers. No single group could have sustained the Montgomery bus boycott for 381 days. But together, hundreds, thousands of people sharing cars, organizing carpools, feeding families, rotating responsibilities, they made the impossible ordinary. The labor movements understood this. Workers did not win an 8-hour workday because one union was suddenly powerful enough to force the change, or business owners suddenly realized that treating people like people might actually be good. No, they won it because textile workers, steel workers, and miners, and thousands of others across hundreds of other industries recognized that an injury to one was an injury to all, and they had to work together. They built mutual aid societies. They cared for the workers and the widows and the orphans. They pooled their resources for strike funds. They shared meeting halls and printing presses. They understood that solidarity was not sentiment, it was a survival strategy. Looking to a more recent example, when the AIDS crisis hit and our government refused to act, some delighting in a disease that killed those it affected. It wasn't an organization that kept people alive. It was ACT UP demanding drug access. It was the gay men's health crisis providing care. It was local volunteers delivering meals. It was lesbians donating blood when no one else would. It was everyday people sitting with the dying when their own families had abandoned them. It was stone soup in the face of a plague and abandonment. Each person brought what they could: medicine, advocacy, presence, rage, tenderness. And together, they built a movement that ultimately saved lives and changed history. This is the work we are called to now. Not work that we do alone, not work where we imagine that we must have all of the answers, all of the resources, all of the capacity, but the work where we ask, what do we have that belongs in the pot? The other week, I stood at an anti-ICE protest at City Hall. Stood in the cold, wondering whether showing up mattered. I was expecting a handful of protesters, maybe. There were hundreds and hundreds of people there. There were a dozen different organizations there: immigrants' rights groups, legal aid networks, faith coalitions, mutual aid collectives, labor organizers, each one doing their piece of the work. Each one bringing what they had: legal expertise, translation services, witnesses, just showing up to bring their voice. These are our neighbors. The week before that, there was a dedication at Prosperity Park, and we were able to give back to one of our partners. Modestly, yes, but we were there. And you know who else was there? More organizations, more potential partners, more people doing the work. Do you see what I'm saying? The pot is already on fire. The water is already boiling. We are not being asked to make soup from scratch. We are being asked to see what's already happening and add what we already have. So, what does Stone Soup ask of us right here in this moment? Don't worry, we will talk about this more and talk about what this looks, and we will do that and talk back over soup. It asks us to be honest with what we have, not what we wish we had, not what we used to have, not what the megachurch down the road has. It asks what is in our pantry right now. We have rooms, we have skills, we have relationships. We have barely begun to imagine what the soup looks like. And most importantly, we have each other. The story of Stone Soup does not work because there is magic in the stones, but because there is power in partnership. Because survival is a shared practice. Because we cannot do this alone, but we can do it together. We are not being asked to save the world ourselves. We are just being asked to unlock the door, to show the pot, to bring what we have, and to trust that that is enough to begin with. Fascism tells us things are ours to protect. They are mine to have and defend. My land, my country, my building, my resources, mine, not yours. Mutual aid tells us that things are more useful when they are helping someone else, not just me. It doesn't work because we are all saints. It works because we understand how the soup is made. You can lock your door and you can guard your salt. You can sit alone in your house congratulating yourself on how well protected your potatoes are. But when the fire goes out, what then? The logic of isolation is the logic of someone who thinks that they can make a feast from a stone and nothing else. Fascism relies on us being hungry, isolated, and convinced that scarcity is an inevitability. Mutual aid is actually what makes sense. We are literally communal creatures. It is a recognition that when mine fails, ours can feed everyone. A many-fold return on a small investment. I give a little salt, I get back soup. I offer a carrot, I get a full meal. The traveler knew that a stone was just a rock until it was put in a pot with someone else's water. So here is my question I want us to sit with. Not to answer out loud right now, not to rush past, just to hold honestly and to discuss soon. If the traveler knocked on our door right now, what would we tell him? Because this is where the story becomes our choice. Amen. Blessed be. Let's make soup.
Our closing words be about the work by Andrea Hawkins Camper. May we see all as it is, and may it all be as we see it. May we be the ones to make it as it should be. For if not us, who? If not now, when? This is answering the cry of justice with the work of peace. This is redeeming the pain of history with the grace of wisdom. This is the work we are called to do, and this is the call we answer now. To be the barrier and the bridge. To be the living embodiment of our principles. To be about the work of building the beloved community. To be a people of intention and a people of conscience.